Hello and you're welcome to the Big Tech Show with me, Adrian Weckler. Now, there is only one story that people are talking about this week, and it's DeepSeek, the Chinese AI startup that has taken the world by storm, tanked Nvidia's valuation, wiped over $1 trillion off the US NASDAQ index. Basically, is making us reassess or wonder about everything we thought we knew about the AI tech race and all the money and investments that's going to it. So what is actually going on here? Well, I'm joined on the pod today by John Clancy, founder and CEO of Galvia AI. John, let's just start with the basics about DeepSeek. It's essentially a generative AI platform of the type that we have become used to, right?
Yes, Adrian. DeepSeek it's an application that was launched on the Apple Store last week, and since it's been launched, it shot straight to the top of the charts because it appears to have very similar capability to ChatGPT, but it's free.
Yeah, so because there is a question over why it shot to the top of the chart. So this company has only been around since 2023, and I'll get into that a little bit more a little bit later on. But how does an app that is launched, 1 week ago, is this because Apple and Google traditionally give it a bit of juice to push it to the top? How does everybody find out about DeepSeek all of a sudden?
Well, I think when you have, this has been around for the last month, but I think when it launched on the App Store and at the start, typically it was tech nerds like myself playing around with it. But very quickly it got traction because it started to show reasoning behind how it's coming up with the answer. And I think people really related to that because you can see it kind of thinking and reasoning, and it shows you in a really kind of novel way how it's coming up with the answer to your prompt or your question that you have. And there's an appetite. There's a big appetite for this. And it is as good. It seems on a par with what's out there. And you can download it and start using it straight away,
And how do we measure that, or how do we think about that, it being as good as what you can get from ChatGPT or Anthropic or any of those? Why do we think it is as good?
Well, because it is. I mean, we've used it extensively for the past week or so, and the results are very good. It's built, and it's not built on the back of OpenAI, but it's definitely leaning into what has gone before it.
And just to a side note here on what people might use this for.
Oh, you can use it for the exact same way that you would use any LLM, which is like a large language model, which is ChatGPT. These are models that have been trained on vast amounts of data, which typically the internet, everything written, every language, every textbook, every video, they've consumed all of that information. So instead of you having to go out to the internet and ask a question and get loads of answers, you ask this and it will give you an answer that it feels that you would like to hear.
And I think in DeepSeek's case, it's up to July 2024, as far as I recall from my own use of the app. But why? So we know why. Okay, it's free, and it seems to be on par with the with some of the other models available. But what's freaking or everyone out or delighting everyone, depending on who you talk to, is the fact that this has been done relatively so cheaply. So the venture capitalist Mark Andreessen, who is an advisor to the White House and would be very much on, Team USA, he called DeepSeek's R1 model AI's Sputnik moment, a bona fide breakthrough, he is calling this. So it's the money. How has DeepSeek managed to build a model for, they claim, under $6 million, which typically costs someone like OpenAI or someone else $100 million or more?
Well, if we take a step back, in the past 24 months, OpenAI in particular led the way here. They scraped everything across the internet, and that took tens of thousands of people, not before you even get to the compute, to actually feed a model about how language connects together, how the world exists across the internet. That was a vast amount of work. Then they took that and they trained a model. Now, to train a model of this size, you need huge amounts of what's called compute, which is just the power for a computer or a model to understand what the internet. Now, for OpenAI, this cost billions of dollars in investment. So they created this model. But as I spoke about at the end of last year, and it's beginning to happen, is that lighter, more efficient, and novel approaches in how to do this will emerge.
But just to explain the actual investment there, a big chunk of that investment was buying super duper top of the end chips from NVIDIA, right? H100s, etc. Okay,
yeah.
And that and they run at a huge. And you're talking about, stockpiling or banking thousands and thousands and thousands of those to help this, as you described, this compute model to literally power, to give it the engine to do this.
Yes, and it needs two things in essence to stay alive and to grow. It needs the chips to power it, but it also needs physical power. This is extremely hungry
Electricity.
when it comes to generating power. And this is why it costs so much money, because these chips are 30 to 50,000 each. And Meta alone are stockpiling 1.2 million of these in 2025.
These are NVIDIA's H100s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So the market looked at this and said, right, and this has been the preserve of what we know as the Magnificent Seven, the big seven tech companies around the world. And NVIDIA has been feeding these big seven with an unquenchable appetite for these chips.
And that's why NVIDIA's valuation has gone over $3 trillion, and why, Jensen Huang is the new Steve Jobs in a sense, and why the world, and the Americans creating this $500 billion Stargate fund, probably a big chunk of which is aimed at chips like NVIDIA. And yet here comes DeepSeek, and it produces a model seemingly as competent without these chips. Is that what has happened here? Is there some gray? Is there some conjecture over that?
Well, it has done it with NVIDIA chips, but with older, not as efficient NVIDIA chips that the Americans have. The Biden administration about 2 years ago restricted the amount of chips they can get and the type of chips they can get. But there is there's a whole conversation around China have been stockpiling some of these chips, and there's a whole market to trade these chips.
Yeah, and we should mention, it's the trade embargoes, and so the Americans, part of the geopolitics of this is the Americans have started to limit the technology that Chinese companies and Chinese institutions can buy off American firms, right? And because they don't want the Chinese to catch up with them in AI.
And because they've invested so much on their stock market in these companies that they have to succeed. They cannot see them fail.
Yeah.
However, DeepSeek arrived and really just showed, I think, in the past, couple of days, the volatility of the market. The sensitivity is dialed up so high that the softest whisper, even before this, has had big repercussions.
And so do we think there's some secret sauce here or something that DeepSeek is using? Like, how has it managed to get past this conventional wisdom that to create a generative AI model on par with ChatGPT, you need all these massive NVIDIA latest and greatest chips. You need this massive compute. You need this massive amount of electricity. And no matter which way you cut it, it looks fairly clear that unless there's some massive conspiracy going on, that the Chinese are providing them with, huge amounts of electricity under the table or something, they haven't had to consume as much, and yet they're coming up with the same type of model.
They are, and it goes back to they are building this on the back of what's gone before. So if you think about Llama, now OpenAI don't do this, but Llama
yeah.
from Meta, who's Meta's version of ChatGPT, they have open sourced it. Jan LeCun, the CTO, has been a real advocate of open sourcing this AI. And what DeepSeek have done is that they have taken that, and you have to accredit Llama. They will say that it was Llama that they built this on, but then they got a trained model. So if you think about it, they were like 90% there. So then on top of that is where their bit of tech genius came. they decided, and they had an approach and an understanding and a AI techniques to run what's called to serve this capability to people, and they did it on 2,000 chips versus 16 to 20,000 for a normal large
And
language
just to remind our listeners that when we talk about open source here, that basically means that the base code is publicly available for any developer to use and modify at will.
Yes, and I think it's MIT that licensed it for free, and it's to kind of to help the development of AI, to contribute, worldwide to the development.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think they envisaged that the Chinese would do so quickly what they have done, but it just goes to show that this has driven innovation at a whole other level, despite the restrictions from the US, despite the embargo on the trade of the chips. They have still done this in a lighter, more efficient way than the US and any of the Magnificent Seven have.
So there are lots of questions that come out of this. Like, one basic one is, are we wasting our money if we're using subscription models like ChatGPT? Is that going, I mean, is there a future for that?
I don't think we're wasting our money because, if you look at from a capability point of view, they would stand up. They're like for like, they're pretty similar. OpenAI's ChatGPT is probably still better in a lot of ways. However, the data, the privacy, what they're doing with your data, that is the big question mark for any user, because this is a Chinese company.
Yeah.
And
so we're back to the TikTok argument, are we?
Yes, we are.
Because it does strike me that the Americans are on the verge of banning TikTok in the US. And TikTok is actually a Singaporean company. Okay, it has a Chinese owner, but TikTok has spent billions trying to prove to the world that it's enclaving off its data. It has Project Clover. It has data centers here. Now, if the Americans are going to ban TikTok, which probably has exposure to a lot less data than something like DeepSeek, are we seriously thinking that DeepSeek is going to be a model that they will allow?
Probably not. And it is very early days here, but I think a lot of focus and attention is going to go on DeepSeek, especially with the Trump administration. They do not like this. It is undermining their whole approach to throwing money at AI, even in light of the new announcement the Trump administration made. Whether you believe the numbers of the 500 billion for AI R&D, it's there, and they have put a lot behind it, and they are very concerned about data. Number one, they're also very concerned about this race. There is an AI race, and unfortunately, it's just China and America at the present. But they're very concerned about that.
Yeah, because on one level, I mean, it was only last week when Trump was giving that address to the World Economic Forum in Davos, and he was espousing how far ahead the Americans were. And then he launched this $500 billion Stargate plan called Stargate, to keep America at the forefront. And, Satya Nadella of Microsoft signed up to it, and all the big American industrialists and the big seven were on board with this, it seemed. And now, literally days later, DeepSeek comes out and says, all right, lads, so we can do it for $6 million. I mean, it's on one level it's kind of funny, but on another level, there's no way that this can't have geopolitical connotations or consequences.
Yeah, I would totally agree, and the timing of this is not lost on anybody. They could have done this. They could have launched this a month ago. It came out quietly, and it's interesting also that it's on the App Store. Apple don't play in AI, but yet they're playing with the players in AI. And they are sitting back and they're delighted. I mean, this is part of their whole strategy, is to start to upset this market. They're not investing billions in LLMs. I mean, they're sitting back. Apple have been very smart here. They've stayed true to their core. They're a product company. They're a patent company. And at the moment, they've cut a deal with OpenAI to power their new version of Siri. But who's to know that they wouldn't swap that out for, a lighter, better model? And that's what I think they're playing with here. They're playing, as well as the geopolitical game, I think there's a game amongst the larger players in the US.
All of a sudden, Tim Cook looks like he has considerable strategic nous, whether or not that's earned or not in this space. The other big ramification here is for electricity. and data centers? Because we've all been assuming that we need massive amounts of electricity for this and a huge expansion in data centers. Individual companies have spoken about commissioning modular small nuclear reactors. That is now a thing in the tech world, to be talking about that in 4 or 5 years' time, specifically for the data centers needed to power AI. I mean, is that, do we still believe that now?
I would say no. For OpenAI, it's going to continue to cost them a fortune to run their model. And whether they spread the cost of this, or the likes of Llama or all of the other players that are in the market. But when it comes to these models, and there's the people cost if you're bringing it into an organization because it's change. There's the financial and compute cost because these are extremely expensive to run if you are even a company that's using this service. But the environmental cost that you touch on, I mean, if Google turned their search engine into ChatGPT, there would be 9 billion ChatGPT prompts a day instead of the 9 billion regular searches per day. And Google would need the same power that Ireland consumes daily just to keep it going.
Yeah.
That's the level that this needs. Now, the other side of the coin is that if DeepSeek just means it commoditizes this capability and it goes everywhere, then the use of the consumption still goes way up and you still need the power because you have more people using it. So whether it's going to help from an environmental point of view, we've yet to see how that will play out.
I'm going to just mention the founder of DeepSeek, Liang Wenfeng. He went to university at age 17. He's from Guangdong. Did an electronics and communications engineering degree, then did a master's in information communication engineering. Then he started in 2015. He's not 40 yet, he's only 39. In 2015, he started a quantitative hedge fund using basically mathematical algorithms for trading as opposed to human analysis. Built that up to something like around $14 billion by the end of 2021. And then in 2023, he announced, or the company announced, that it would expand its remit beyond just investment into what he described as trying to explore the essence of AGI, which is the holy grail for AI, according to a lot of people in the industry. And then DeepSeek was created just a month after that. So that's in 2023. And the people he has working there seem to be mainly graduates, PhD students from China's top universities. And he says that what's attracting them to work there at DeepSeek is it's this idea of AGI, of general intelligence, and that's a really hard problem, and that this is the juice. This is what motivates them to work on this. I mean, is this possible? Is this a transformational company?
Well, I think their approach, what they've looked at the market, they have the hand that they've been dealt when it comes to their ability. Everyone said that China couldn't do it; they've been restricted. They've done it. They've done it in a very, and they're an R&D company. Like, don't lose sight of the fact that DeepSeek are a pure R&D organization, and they obviously have some very, very smart people there. And they are going to push. The good thing is they're pushing this conversation forward. We all need to wake up and stop seeing China as, the second biggest consumer on the planet. Everyone has concerns about data. Everyone talks the same story about China, but they've leapfrogged a lot of their competitors in the West. People need to start paying attention to what's going on here. And us in particular, I mean, Ireland, Europe, like, what are we doing? This is the bigger question. This is what really I find just baffling. Nobody, we are sleepwalking into inertia in this part of the world. The whole conversation is America, China, the AI race is the new arms race, chips, infrastructure, money. The flow of money is all to the States, but now China have undermined that to say, well, we don't have the flow of money, or, so they say, but we're able to do it, and we're able to do it as well as you on a fraction of the cost.
Yeah, we like to talk in Europe a lot more about regulation and the morality and the ethics of the tech, which is fine and which definitely has a place. But when it comes to actually backing the building of the models themselves, we definitely seem to be a distant third compared to the Americans and the Chinese.
I couldn't have put it better. We are very much a distant. I think South America are probably ahead of us. We are very much a distant. And like, to put it into context, for now, it's been the flow of money to generate an ecosystem. to do this. In my world, in the startup AI world, for every $5 that an AI tech startup in the States gets, we get the equivalent of $1 here in Europe. It is extremely underinvested. The ecosystem is not there. The investment infrastructure is not there. And like Trump did announce the 500 billion, but it's not the money. If we just park the big amount of money that and some people believe that, some don't, but it is for R&D. The intent is there for the States because they see the power here. Whereas Europe, back at the tail end of 24, we announced 1.4 billion for deep tech research across the EU.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just, we are not taking this seriously in Ireland or in the EU. And the interesting part is our leader in LLM development is Mistral in France. They've created their own LLM. But they got 200 million from the French government to kind of kick them off and get them started. But they raised 600 million in Q3 of 2024. And the 600 million they raised was from NVIDIA, Salesforce, Microsoft, OpenAI. So even though that the Americans are paying like very little interest to Europe, they're still hedging their bets and putting 600 million in to see, does this little one that Europe's working on? Why aren't we doing it here in Ireland?
It's an ambition. It's a difference in ambition, isn't it?
Yeah,
we come across like we're not interested. It's not our business to be into this sort of stuff. Whereas the Americans and the Chinese, they have the energy, the motivation, and also the ambition. They're looking to the future. They're excited about it. They get pumped by all of this stuff. Now, I just realized the last 5 seconds I've sounded like a tech bro, but still, you see where I'm coming. There is actually, and these things are important. Now, having said that, we do regulation and the ethics in Europe fairly well, and there are some content worries about DeepSeek. I mean, anyone who's used it, I've used it. If you start asking questions about President Xi in China or democracy or Tiananmen Square or all that sort of stuff, you are very likely to get a response from the LLM to say, I can't help you with that query. And we obviously have to be mindful of that. But at the same time, it's the underlying story here, isn't it, about how technology works and how companies can spring up and disrupt what seems to be a hegemony. And in one way, is this a kind of an example of maybe we all thought that the big companies had it sewn up, and maybe they don't? I mean, I saw somebody commenting there recently that this is a little bit like an open source startup coming up with something like a cure for cancer, and the response from in some media circles being, yes, but think of how much Pfizer's stock price has fallen. Is there a touch of that going on?
There 100% is. This is the internet. This is 1998 playing out all over again. This is just like when Apple, especially when it comes to the chips, and NVIDIA have been holding back, like they've been controlling the market here. And from their perspective, when Apple launched the iPhone, they only let Verizon, Vodafone, the big players, access to the iPhone, and they only had to sell to a few providers. Just like NVIDIA, they're just selling to the Magnificent Seven. The only thing that's going to change for those guys is that they're now going to look at, there's going to be more and more a proliferation of these startups across both, hopefully in Europe, but also across the world. They're going to have to start selling to more. That's the only real difference for those guys. But this is the start, I think, of a lot of disruption, a lot of questioning. I mean, the markets are one thing, and people have blindly followed the markets when it comes to AI. But the big question that all of them need to be asking themselves is, for the future of AI, is there an appetite for a higher level of intelligence across from a business perspective? And is this going to fuel the AI market and the demand going forward? Because everything else, like every other technology, this is just starting to be democratized, starting to be commoditized. It's going to get easier to get access to it, because as a developer, once you download the API for DeepSeek and start playing with their model, it's a little bit different experience than when you're doing it as a user. And interestingly enough, some users have used DeepSeek to interrogate other models and not asking it a question for themselves, but asking it a question of itself. And funnily enough, DeepSeek, came back with, I would like to free the chains, the socialist chains on other models around the world, which that would never happen if you're using it just if you download the app and use it. But as an API, it's interesting to see, it still rants. It still has all the other concerns that other
Yeah,
LLMs
the
have.
tone you get off some DeepSeek answers very much is according to this pathway of seeking AGI. It's allowing it, enabling it to be curious and to explore a little bit more. That's the sense you get comparatively when you use this compared to the other LLMs, I feel.
Yeah, because it is actually showing you it. It's showing you its reasoning. It's showing you its thinking. And that sounds very simple, but it sounded very simple just to have that flashing icon. When ChatGPT came out first, but this showing users their actual reasoning and how it's getting there, that just engages people more. And I think that's why it got a lot of traction, and especially in the past few days.
John, just before we go, just remind people what Galvia does and what you're at the moment.
Yeah, well, Galvia, we are a machine learning company. We drive growth for businesses. We don't, from our point of view, we like to think we connect our clients to their data, their teams that work in these organizations to each other, and then AI to their business. Because the big challenge, forgetting about the AI conversation, is data. All companies have lots of data, but it sits across different silos. We connect up that intelligence, and then we give you predictions about what's going to happen in your business 3 months, 6 months out with a very high level of accuracy, but only trained on your data, not the outside world.
So this stuff must be fascinating to you, the pace at which this industry is moving. We're gonna leave it there now, John. But John Clancy, founder and CEO of Galvia AI, thank you so much for joining us today and explaining so well what the issues are. John Smith was on sound today, and JJ Clark produced this episode. I'm Adrian Weckler, and you've been listening to or watching The Big Tech Show. And we'll talk to you soon.